fact, and I don't want to say we don't. I mean, I hope and believe that many people are starting to move towards this, and I don't necessarily mean meditation, sitting in lotus pose, although that's a good thing to do. But it's just about sit down with yourself on your couch for 5 minutes a day and reflect on everything that took place during that day and how it made you feel, and just think about that. I mean, it's just about becoming conscious. When you're a conscious person and you're aware of your thoughts, your words, and your actions, it's a lot more difficult for someone to manipulate you and influence you in ways that you don't want to be.
Very important points, because when someone's not in balance with their true self and they're a slave to someone else, either in the workplace or someone else's values, perhaps values that were imprinted from either parental influences or the public educational school system or the media or even relationships, disease, lack of flow can happen within one's psyche, within one's body. And when that happens, when someone's out of balance, especially when they don't know they're out of balance, one may seek to medicate in some form, and that could lead to addiction. And it is through reaching some sort of a bottom, or hitting the bottom, that one may seek to meditate, or seek to reach out to the spiritual realms for help. I've been in that situation. You've been in that situation. Tell us a little bit about your early life and some of the early trials and tribulations you went to that kind of helped catapult you to the journey that you're on today.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this story because, as you said, I got to talk with Luke about it for We Are Change and do a video on that. And I've told this story, but I'm going to give you a little bit more in-depth version of it, if you don't mind. And
yeah, that'd be great.
Preface that first with saying that this is not meant to be a sob story of any kind. In fact, I see it as probably quite the opposite of that. But I tell these details, some of them that can be painful or, can be frightening, disturbing for other people to hear, because I know a lot of us, as you said, you've had your own struggles, and we all struggle in our own ways, and not everybody struggles with drugs or with addiction, but we do struggle in our own ways. And sometimes I think people can be really turned off by those things. Like, for example, if I tell somebody I've been to prison or, had a drug addiction, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, if you're sorry, that's fine, but I'm fine. Like, I'm all right talking about it. In fact, I feel empowered by talking about it. So I just want to preface that this is, if you're struggling in any way possible, then please reach out to me. Let's try to talk, and I'd love to be there for you. I've had that happen quite a bit recently, and I am always available for that. But I dealt with growing up having a family history of lockup, of drug addiction, and things like that. My birth father spent the majority of my first 27 years here in prison. I met him a handful of times growing up, and did that thing, visiting him in prison, getting lied to as a child, visiting an adult in prison. I think that really had some influences on my ability to trust people, and my search for self-fulfilling love and things like that. So as I grew up and started to mistrust people and be unsure about why adults would say this and do this, and also sort of question and wonder like what this cage was that I was going to visit my father in, and what these things were called drugs that everybody was always talking about. And it created a lot of different questions in my mind. And as I got older, a lot of that went into depression before I was ever even using drugs or, ever really. I think I smoked weed when I was like 15, but it wasn't really like I turned into a drug addict right away. It was just like, for me, it was literally like it was something that I was, I guess, just trying to escape, because I got in trouble a lot. I got into fights and got arrested by the time I was 16 and did all that stuff. But I was also at the same time, an honors student all the way through high school, and even graduated high school 6 months early. But nobody knew that. They just knew that I was the crazy kid in school who they assumed was on drugs and got into a lot of trouble and things like that. And, now it's pretty obvious looking back that I was just like lashing out and trying to get some attention that I hadn't had before, and trying to deal with those in different ways. And so it's interesting to see the ways that when we're in pain, we revert back to childlike behavior and screaming like, hey, pay attention to me, even as adults to this day. So I dealt with that for a long time and getting locked up. As I said, I graduated high school early, started going to school, But I started drinking a lot, and then basically just spent the next few years after high school, after graduating at 18, kind of bouncing around from drug to drug, just really experimenting. I mean, I was just having fun at the time. I was, just out of school and going to school part-time and having my own place and partying with friends and doing all that. But underneath that, there was still this underlying pain, which I think is usually the case with most of these issues, and including a belief in government, that there is a underlying pain and issue that needs to be resolved that allows one to do these certain things that are really, in the end, damaging and counterproductive to your life. And so I went from trying Xanax and bars, doing things like that, drinking a lot, ecstasy, and would go through periods of using drugs and then kind of getting stuff figured out. And really, honestly, it kind of centered around, I guess, relationships with other people, just allowing myself for a second, like I'd find somebody new and be like, okay, well, I get along and life's great, this and that. But I didn't have that real, true self-love that I'm still, even to this day, working on and building. But at that time, I really had none at all. And so it was almost as if without somebody else there to hold me up, I couldn't move forward, or at least I believed so. And so drugs were a coping mechanism for a lot of those pains. And then when I was 20 years old, I found myself in one of those up phases, had an apartment, had a nice job, had a lady, and was doing well, and ran into some old friends that I hadn't seen in a long time. And they had picked up crystal meth in our time apart. And it wasn't really anything that I was, I was always just kind of like, all right, yeah, sure, I'll try that. It was, I guess, just naive, just open to new experiences, who knows. But I wasn't, immediately ready to do it. I was just like, yeah, sure, I'm working, I'm busy, you guys can hang out and party, whatever, I'm going to bed, I'll get around to trying it eventually. And, so it wasn't anything that I was, like, desperate to and in a hurry to try. But once I did try it, I mean, I think I spent, like, $250 that first night, and lost my job within a week of that, and damaged a relationship, a couple different relationships and family relationships and stuff like that. And basically that began a 10-month period that led to me losing my apartment, getting evicted, losing most of my possessions and the job. And as I said, damaging relationships and being homeless, and then living in a crack house, meth house, and then getting myself sober. And shortly after getting locked up. And I basically, I just found myself in a position, as I said, where I was in a house with people who were really not people that I would call friends. They're still human beings and still good people. They were just lost in their own ways as well. But I was just recognizing more and more that, like, I'm really desperate to try to change my life. And I've, burned a bunch of bridges, and people kicked me out and turned me away and things like that. And these people here that I'm surrounding myself with, they don't seem to care, and they don't really seem to have any solutions to offer. And so it was really just that difficult position of pulling myself out of that and deciding. And I remember telling a friend of mine, like, please don't offer me any more meth or anything really, because I was like, I'm really seriously trying to quit so I can get my shit together. And he, I remember him being like, yeah, me too, man. Right before he snorted another line or something, and that was kind of the usual thing. If you've been a drug abuser before, you know what that feels like. And, sometimes you generally believe yourself that, yeah, this is going to be the last time, and you're just not ready yet. But I was serious about it. And so, honestly, smoking marijuana helped me out a lot, because my anxiety was so shot through the roof. And, like, I mean, I can't even have a cup of coffee these days anymore, or really handle any kind of caffeine or amphetamines that just make me a little bit jittery. I was using mass amounts of this stuff and selling it, and the people I was involved with ended up getting, like, raided by the FBI like a couple weeks before I got arrested. And I don't think it was related in any way. I think I was just being kind of a dumbass out there riding around with warrants out for me. And I'd been on drugs for a while, and I kind of just lost it a little bit. So I was just waiting to get arrested, basically. And yeah, so I found myself in that situation. Smoking marijuana helped me with my anxiety and gave me the strength, or assisted me to have the strength to end up getting up and leaving that place and going back to my family and just, trying to do whatever it took to make things right with them and move on with my life. And I was doing that, in the process of doing that, and was running short on cash. And I fortunately, I guess, decided to try to use an old habit, selling drugs, to make some money so I could get enough money to put myself back on my feet. And in that process, I was pulled over and arrested. So that's what led to a year lockup and then a 3 to 4 year process of probation, and then of my felony and then parole, and spending a total of 18 months behind bars. I got off parole in June 2009, and that was like I said, right about that time. After going through all that, like, I got into meditation when I was locked up. I got into just self-reflection. I wrote a whole bunch and really just tried to figure out how I found myself in the same position as my father, somebody that I had a lot of anger towards for being locked up for the things he was doing, and then finding myself in the same position was a real kick in the stomach, and it was just a wake-up call for me in a lot of ways. So I did what I could to reflect and learn, and meditation and Buddhism and Zen specifically were a huge part of that. And that process changed my life, and it led to me, I'd say, getting into activism, rediscovering my intelligence, researching what was really going on in the world, taking a bike tour that changed my life as well, and led to everything that has happened to me, including talking with you.
I want to focus a little bit on this period of 2009 where you get out of prison and you start to get more involved. Was this more of a self-directed, self-motivated recovery process that you were involved in, Derrick, or did you get forced into AA or NA by the state? Were you forced into any inpatient programs? I was in the year 2000, 2001, and around that time period. Did you have to go through those aspects of the system as well, or you just jumped straight into activism?
I was required to, go to certain aftercare classes and stuff like that as part of conditions of probation and parole. But I was sober when I got arrested. I quit using crystal and crazy things like that in September 2005, and then I got arrested in November 2005. So honestly, for me, it was like, I told this story before, but my mom found me in my closet just crying, begging for a pause. I felt life was spinning out of control for me and things like that. And so I got my pause. So after I accepted that I wasn't getting out, and I realized, okay, this, I'm not, you're looking at the calendar and you're like, okay, I'm not going to go outside till this point next year. And then you accept that point. It led me to start doing more self-reflection. So I kind of was already open to the idea of the change, but yeah, I had to fulfill those conditions of going to certain classes.
So you helped yourself out. I'm just asking you because I'd like to get your review on the state's version. I think we should address that a little bit today, because a lot of people get thrown into the state's idea of what recovery is, as was I. And I tried to help for years people that were still suffering from their addiction, because I felt that their addiction stemmed from not knowing who they were and not being on the path, that they were incarnated into this time-space reality to fulfill. I think that we have these life roles, these life paths to fulfill, and if we're not doing that, massive imbalance can take over the body and the aura. And then through there, severe drug addiction that could lead to insanity or death. And not everyone escapes that. And I see people in these recovery rooms go in and out, in and out, in and out, because they're not addressing why they were using. And they're using negative self-affirmations from the big book of AA, that they were actually born with a deformity called a disease of addiction or alcoholism, which I believe is learned behavior. So what are your thoughts on, the state's idea of recovery and where disease comes from versus what you've learned?
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make there, because when I tell this story, I think I've had more than a couple of people ask me this question, or I guess misunderstand me and falsely believe that I'm kind of praising the state and the prison system as having saved my life. But by no means am I saying that at all, because I met plenty of amazing people. And earlier this year, just 5 or 6 months ago, I had a friend that I've known since sixth grade die of a heroin overdose after struggling with drugs for years. And I've lost plenty of good people to drug addiction and to the prison system. And seeing people go in there, as I'm sure you have, who were just innocent kids who got caught, fighting at school, or just some small